When things start to feel like they're falling through the cracks, the first place we go is we need a system. Is that true or false?
How does building all of these things that I now have to do save me time and actually help me get more done?
Which should somebody do first, build the system or hire the team member?
Why do most systems stop getting used within days and weeks?
Welcome back to the Sustainable Creator Podcast. If you have ever gotten to the point in your business where it feels like things are just overwhelming, falling through the cracks, and you start to wonder if you need a system, today's episode is going to be for you. We're sitting down with Brittany Pearson, who is a ClickUp expert and a verified ClickUp consultant, which means ClickUp themselves verified her as a legitimate expert, which means she knows what she's talking about. She is really good at helping business owners get out of the weeds of their businesses and helping them scale using simplified systems. So we're going to have a lot we're going to cover with her today. I'm really excited for this. You guys are in for a treat. So as always, make sure you have a way to take notes and stay tuned to the end to know where to connect with Brittany even more if you have follow-up questions, because we're going to have a lot of goodness to talk about today. Welcome to the podcast, Brittany. We're glad that you're here.
Thank you. That intro was so amazing. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yes, I am a verified ClickUp consultant. I've been building ClickUp for online business owners since 2019. But I've worked with tons of systems, and I've always landed back on ClickUp. So I'm really excited to dive in more of that today.
So before we jump straight into the deep end, what's your coolest claim to fame?
My coolest claim to fame, my superpower that I like to call, is I am very good at being able to see chaos and organize it into a simplified system that you can scale with your business. I've never played sports as a kid. I'm not very good at many things, but this is my superpower and I love doing it.
Systems are your sport of choice, is what you're saying.
Exactly. That's
That
right.
is a sport. It counts.
It is.
Okay, well, on that note, we like to start with definitions because everyone can have a different definition of their own of what a system means. Like, it can look like a lot of things. So in your words, what do you define as a system?
A system is a standardized process that you have in place, especially if you have a team, kind of like a one-stop shop for your business, where you organize your tasks, you have your team going in there, something that can scale with your business as you continue to grow. A system is kind of like the heart and soul of your business. Like you have to have that in order to be able to scale in your business.
That's good.
So kind of in your answer there is process.
Yeah.
As a ClickUp expert, how do you differentiate between like the process that you go through and the tool that you used? Are those both systems? Are they separate? Is it one and the same?
Kind of one and the same. Like you have to have clear processes in order to build your systems. An issue that I see when people start using their systems is it kind of shows the cracks in their processes if they do not have clear processes. So if you try to build your system before you have clear workflows and processes, you're kind of setting yourself up to fail. So I always say it's important to identify what the processes look like in your business. And it could be as simple as what a task is supposed to look like from start to finish. What your workflow is supposed to look like for your team before you actually go and build out your system, if that makes sense.
Editing Lyndon hopping in here real fast. If you're a creative service provider that feels like you're drowning in your business right now, whether it's a process like we're talking about, or it's your offers or where your leads are coming from, that's exactly where a coach can come in really handy. You have someone to talk through that can show you other ways of doing things and ask questions to drill down into your business that you're just not even thinking about. We currently have a few spots open for coaching starting here in July. If you're interested in talking about that, you can book a discovery call in the description below. And now back to the episode.
I think you might have answered my next question for me, but I'm going to ask it just in case there's more, because you brought up things falling through the cracks. I think a lot of creatives, especially when things start to feel like they're falling through the cracks, the first place we go is we need a system. Is that true or false?
100% true. And that's actually the number one thing my clients come to me. It's usually one of two things. The first thing is I feel like my business is kind of, growing outside of what I can keep up with. And now I need a system. So they're backtracking. Or the second thing, which is what you just said, like my team members are, we're missing tasks. We can't keep up with them. Like what is happening? So they usually come to me and it's like, I can identify like what exactly is happening. And it's usually because they either don't have the correct system in place or they have no system at all. So things, of course, are falling through the cracks.
So for those people, they come to you, there's things falling through the cracks, they're not making it through their daily to-do list that they've been writing out, and stuff are just like falling off the bottom. What is the first step to even start the process? Because starting is the hardest part.
Yes. So the process for me when I'm talking with those clients is I actually ask those questions of like, what exactly is it that's going wrong in your business? And sometimes they don't even realize it. So they need someone like me to come in and say like, hey, you mentioned X, Y, and Z, but what's actually happening here is, you're stuck in the middle now, or maybe that my client is part of the bottleneck, part of the issue. Maybe they don't realize that they never set up their team for success to begin with. So they don't have those clear SOPs. And that's something I could talk a lot about too, of like how it's very easy to kind of blame a team member or say like, why didn't, you do this, right the first time? And if you actually take some accountability, which I have to have those tough conversations sometimes, is did you ever set them up correct? Do you have that system? And I say system, everyone has a system, whether it's ClickUp or Google Docs or Google Spreadsheets, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be ClickUp all the time. Obviously, I'm a ClickUp girly, so I'm always going to say ClickUp. But just any project management tool. But everyone has a system. So I always look into that first. So I'll do like an audit essentially. But I help them see like it's not always a team member's fault, or like this is where they fell because you didn't set them up. That's not always the case, but 99% of the time it usually is, because you never set them up for success in the beginning with those clear SOPs, what a clear picture of what done should look like for whatever the task is, whatever the project is. So.
Okay. So I think what would be really helpful here is if we apply this to like a real-time example, because that is so helpful. And I know a lot of our listeners are either starting a podcast or they want to, or they're restarting a podcast. We have a podcast. Obviously, you guys are listening to it. So what if we just take the example of podcasting and we turn it into how like back in school when we had math problems, they would do word pictures. Like, let's just do a word picture real quick. So could we real time build a system or process based on podcasting?
Sure. So when I was a VA back in my day, I used to help, and I was not charging what I should have, but I was building systems as a VA, getting paid $10 an hour. I would help build out podcast templates for team members when they would come in. So the first task was always, obviously very basic. Find a thumbnail, create a thumbnail, help, it depending on how involved we wanted the team member, and they would help. So the first task would be like help create a title and or graphic, right? And after, again, it just depended on how involved we wanted the team member, but was helping, create the transcripts, whether it was even helping editing. A lot of the time we had a video editor that would help, make little edits, between, kind of like this, like you're probably gonna have to edit this part out, but creating edits, making, clips to post on social media. We would, pull in our social media manager at the time as well. So that would be another task as well. Kind of like start to finish of what the process of creating, from creating the title, the graphic, the thumbnail, posting it. And then obviously, and I don't know how in depth you want to go to, but even creating like automations for like when one task is complete, it would tag the next team member, which would be the social media manager. And then all of that kind of goes together, if that makes sense.
No, that does make a ton of sense. And I'm curious, the difference for you, like in walking through that process, sometimes it's passing it off to another team member. Mm-hmm. Do automations play the same if it's you still starting out doing all of the tasks yourself, or does the system look different if it's just you doing the work?
So that's a great question. I always, depending on the size of the team, I always want to utilize automations, but the simplest form. And that would be a simple form of doing it. So like when a status changes to in progress, it would alert the next team member like, hey, you can now start on this. Or we can also create, you can do so many things in ClickUp, but we can create a bunch of things that, the team member won't start on the task until it's been completed. Now, if you're kind of solo, you're kind of doing those things by yourself, but you can also still create those automations of like, hey, this, due date's coming up in a couple of days, just as a reminder. And then also as you add team members into your ClickUp space, you can that's the good thing about ClickUp and the way that I build it is I do very basic, simple forms of it. So that way, when you add a team member, it can continue to grow with you.
So for someone going through this, like you just off the top of your head, because you've done podcasts before, you're like, oh, this is all the steps. I think in steps. I know how this works out. For someone that just does things because it intuitively is the next thing, do you have some form of like diagnostic process or thing you help them do to like actually figure out what is the sequential steps that I go through?
Yeah. So I always challenge my clients to do just that because they've done these tasks forever. So it's like second nature to them. They're not thinking of it as something that they need to do all that, document every single process. But I actually tell them, like, if you were coming in here for the very first time, what would you need to do to complete X, Y, and Z? So if you're hiring a virtual assistant that's never done anything podcast related, what SOPs do they have? And my goal with SOPs, and I always tell this to my clients, is I don't want the team member to have to come ask you questions that should have been answered in the SOP. So apart from building the system, having those SOPs are just equally as important because you don't want to be dragged into the weeds answering the same questions that should have been answered in the SOP, right? So that's kind of what I always challenge my clients to do. And a lot of the time it's like, hey, I'm coming into your business for the first time and I don't know how to do this task. So I'm going to actually help you create this SOP. And this is what I would need to be able to complete the task from start to finish. So.
Okay, I'm curious because SOPs, like we hear about that a lot too, and like clearly it ties into us. I think that's another thing that a lot of us can get really in our heads about and overthink. And something that you care a lot about is simplifying things. There's a lot of power and the simple systems are the ones that stick. So when you apply that to SOPs, can you give a couple of examples of how to simplify it?
My favorite way of creating SOPs is always filming, like literally just filming and like a Loom video screen recording, just showing what the task should look like when it's done. So walking through those steps. Now, obviously, sometimes it's a bigger video, and I always try to keep them under 10 minutes. People's attention spans, unfortunately, myself too. If I see a 15-minute, 20-minute SOP video, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be long, right? So I always start off doing that. So I'm a visual learner. Almost all the team members, all of my clients that I, help train on ClickUp are visual learners too. So I try to keep the video, even if I have to break apart the SOP, that's something that I do too. Because again, no one is most likely going to watch a 30-minute Loom video training, right? No, or even read an SOP that's like that, right? And I know people love to use ChatGPT and that's okay too. But if you've ever asked ChatGPT to build you an SOP, it's the most overwhelming thing. Even for a task that I know how to do, I'm like, this is overwhelming. And obviously you can use that as a guide, but I would take out any extra fluff. Another important thing that I like to do with my SOPs after I film that video is add timestamps in the transcript, or not even the transcript, because I do a written SOP beneath it as well. I'll say, hey, 3 minutes is where I explain how to update this automation. 5-minute mark is what, how to tag a team member if the automation, whatever, if it doesn't work correctly. So I always add timestamps. That way they're not having to watch the whole video every single time if they have a specific question. So I always love to do that.
No, I love that. I think what I just heard was basically look at what you're already doing, especially if you're a solopreneur, and start to track the different steps for yourself and record how you're doing it. Because even if you're working by yourself right now, like you're probably eventually going to outsource in some way, like a podcast manager or editor or something, and they will all have their own processes. But if you know the ones that work really well for you and your standards and business, having those ready to go is going to save your life.
I actually did that with my virtual assistant when I hired, because I wasn't at the point, a year ago where I needed to hire for this specific role, but I was already creating those SOPs just to have. And then when I hired her, I just assigned her the task in ClickUp, gave her a due date of a few days to review it. And it was that simple.
Yeah. I love that.
So if I think about this point, we've now talked about like building out a podcast process or system. You go through all of those steps that you've defined. There's an SOP that's a 5 to 10 minute video for each of those things that either you're doing or someone else is doing so that you have a standardized process. If I tie this back to one of the original questions of things are slipping through the cracks and I'm not getting through the end of my to-do list, can you connect the dots for us of how does building all of these things that I now have to do save me time and actually help me get more done?
Yeah. So in the beginning, it's going to feel like, oh my gosh, this is actually taking a lot of time. Like, am I doing this correctly? But as a business owner, I feel like just, again, just being my own business owner myself, sometimes you have to do the hard work in the beginning to be able to see the fruits of your labor in the end. And it's always, and again, I'm very visual, but I'm also very detail oriented. And I feel like it's really important to be able to be very detailed in the beginning, like I said, because you don't want to have to backtrack. Because I will say, I'll be very honest, before I was primarily a ClickUp girly, I was using Trello at the time, and I outgrew Trello, and I knew I should have started with a bigger system that could grow with me. So I was backtrack. I reached a point where I was scaling so fast in my business, and I had to essentially start over, building a new system altogether. And I felt like I was drowning. And that's why I'm so passionate about building a system that can scale with you. Even if you have no team members, or if you're a brand new business, you should start with something that can scale with you. That way, when you do get to the point of hiring a team and you already have your systems in place, obviously you're going to have to, there's going to be a growing period, some growing pains, no matter what, whether so if you're, and this is something I always want to say, there's always going to be a learning curve no matter what. Whether you have a super simplified system in place, there's always going to be a learning curve for any team member that comes in. So for instance, if they're learning, how to do the podcast for the first time, it's going to be a little overwhelming for them, right? It's going to be, right. Especially when they're watching those Loom videos, it can feel like, oh, wow, there's a lot of, SOPs, but it's still good to have those in place for them to always come back to.
I think it's interesting that we're getting into the team dynamics too, because that's a big question for people, It's like, I'm so used to working on my own. What happens when I bring on more to my team? Even if it's a contractor, even if it's just one person, the dynamic is going to change. If I even think back to when we started working together almost 5 years ago now, I mean, we didn't have any onboarding week. And that was something in hindsight that we both look back on and go, that would have helped a ton, because I made the assumption, since I had been running the business before Lyndon joined full time, we had talked about things and I just assumed he could figure it out and would know what to do, right? I think that's very common for a lot of entrepreneurs. You are very used to the processes that are inside of your head. Having ways to be able to get it out and communicate it to people as they join is incredibly helpful. So that kind of brings me to something that you do really well is you ask a series of questions before building anything new. Would you mind just sharing some of those questions? I think they would be so valuable for listeners.
Yeah. So obviously some of the questions are very basic of like, how many team members do you have? What kind of statuses do you want? And I see statuses as like parts of the workflow. So like, does anyone need to be made aware of? So like if you have an OBM that needs to review something, we want to make sure that we're tagging the OBM. If you are a agency owner and your client needs to approve a piece of content or whatever it is, do we need to tag? So I'm asking questions like that, even as like I said, as in depth of like, what kind of automations are you looking for? I'll ask questions of what your current processes look like. Now, obviously, I don't expect them to give me a whole debrief in the form that I send them. And we talk a lot about that on our kickoff calls. And they usually my clients come ready with a document. And I tell them, even if it's a 20-page document, again, I can make simplicity out of chaos. Like that is, again, my superpower. So I'm always, telling them, show me your processes, because I also, as I am reading reading the questions in the form, I'm able to pick out like, okay, so this is obviously a bottleneck that they're experiencing, right? Without them even knowing that I'm doing that, because this is what I do every day, right? I can identify problems pretty quickly. I'm like, oh, that's not really going to work, which is okay. That this is part of the process. And I always tell them, like, as I'm going through things, and they typically trust me too. I'm like, just trust that, trust the process here, that I'm going to make, your life easier in the end. So, but the form is like a 20 question type of thing. Yeah. Where I'm again, just pulling in any information, and asking them to send me any SOPs and stuff that they think that I need to be made aware of too, because I need to learn their business as well. So I'm, gathering a lot of information, at that time too. So
I think when I was in grad school, I took a class on operations and logistics, and we spent a lot of time talking about bottlenecks. And it's something that I care a lot about. And I've realized that most people don't think that way. So can you break down what the idea of a bottleneck is?
Yeah. So when I think of a bottleneck, I'm like, well, why is this task continuing to get stuck? Sometimes, most of the time, right, my clients end up being the bottleneck. And it could be as simple as like, hey, maybe the SOP isn't clear, or maybe there is no SOP in place. Sometimes it could be that you just don't have the right team member in the right seat. I would say about 99% of the time, it's just that the process is not clear. And instead of fixing the process because my clients are busy, they're like, I'll just handle it. Like I'll just continue doing it. I'll send that quick email. I'll make that quick post. I'll make that quick edit, and then we'll revisit the SOP. And it almost never gets done. So they end up being the bottleneck, and they end up getting frustrated when, again, you can kind of trace it back to the beginning where the SOP is either out of date or it just was never created correctly because they're busy, right? So
that is interesting. As you were talking, I started thinking about how we become bottlenecks as we grow and at different stages. Like, just when you solve it one time doesn't mean it won't happen again. So do you have a process yourself where you do routine audits on these systems? And what does that look like?
Yeah. So particularly for the SOPs, because I feel like that's where you're going to be taken out of the weeds the most when you're, building out a system, training your team members. If you have solid SOPs, it's going to kind of prevent you from being the bottleneck. But I also go as far as to add automations that, hey, it's been 6 months since this SOP has been created. We need to revisit this and because things change all the time, especially if you're a marketing agency, social media, whatever, right? Social media changes all the time. Tasks can change all the time. You want to make sure that you're always up to date with the clearest SOP. It doesn't have to be every 6 months. I always say that once or twice a year, depending on how big the task is. So that's what I kind of always do. I have a client that I just wrapped up a ClickUp build for, and she is going to come back to me in 6 months and wants me to audit their system. They're actually a vet clinic, which was the first time I've ever done that. So that was interesting. So I built out their online portal and stuff like that and inside of ClickUp for their clients and their team and stuff. And she's growing rapidly, creating new courses and things like that. And I'm going to go back in 6 months and do an audit, make sure those automations that are in place are still working. Their team is still having everything that they need. Their SOPs are still clear and they're in one place, which, by the way, that's very important. You shouldn't have to click a billion places to find an SOP. An SOP should live in the task itself, so that way it's really easy to find.
One of the things that I think about, like with SOPs, is every couple weeks you create a new one, and then you're now collecting this 6-month time frame. I need to audit my SOPs. And the first year in business, or the first year with your process, that's okay. You now have like 5 or 10 SOPs you have to check in and audit. In year 2, you have 10 or 20. In year 3, you have a couple teammates that are all creating SOPs, and you have like 60 SOPs you have to audit. So how do you think about the idea of when you should be getting rid of your SOPs?
Yes, when they're no longer applicable, like if people are not using them. And I also, again, have inside of like the SOP hub is what I call it with my clients. I'll have like an inactive status as well. So like when it goes to inactive, meaning like we don't need it anymore, but we don't necessarily want to get rid of it just yet. Maybe we want to keep it on the back burner just in case we need something from that SOP, or maybe we want to use it. I have that as a status where it doesn't delete it, but it removes it from the view in ClickUp. But as a whole, I used to be an OBM back in my day, and that was actually my job. I would go through all of my clients' SOPs. It was like a massive project that I would do, but it was important, right? Where I would go through the SOPs for my clients and make sure that they were still being used. And the thing I love about ClickUp too is it will tell you when the document was last access. So if it hasn't been accessed in a year, we obviously don't need it, right? And again, we don't want to remove it because maybe if we hire on a new team member, they need to see that, right? But yeah, there are business owners that have, hundreds of, SOPs. And I feel like breaking those apart in different chunks too, especially if you have like an executive assistant or someone that's kind of like your right-hand person. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like you have to, it's kind of like a task that you can't really get away from. And that's where I feel like people start to utilize ChatGPT, which again, I'm not against ChatGPT. I use it. It's fine. I use it as a guide, but you can ask chat and say, this is the process that we currently have, paste the SOP in there and say, these are the things that have changed. Can you reword this for me? And that's where I like to use ChatGPT. For the initial build of it, I don't really love it. Very robotic. I don't love it for that. But in terms of like refreshing it and, saving you as much time as possible, I'm totally game for that. So
I think that's worth getting into for like a little bit because I mean, there are a lot of really good uses of AI, right? And that's something that we've talked a lot about on our end too, is like how can we use AI intentionally for some of that automation and to be able to take things up a notch. So, what are some other ways that you really like to use AI intentionally as a systems pro?
Yes. So I love utilizing my newest fascination has been formulas inside of ClickUp. And that can feel very overwhelming. A lot of people don't even realize you can use formulas in ClickUp. And they're coming out with more and more capabilities, and formulas is one of them. So I started instead of, because I wanted to save time on my end, because I was doing a build for a client, and she wanted some very specific numbers shown in her dashboard. And I was like, I feel like we can come up with a formula for that. So this is when I use ChatGPT as a guide, because I feel like a lot of people are like, I don't want to rely too much on ChatGPT. And I agree with that. But like you said, we can use it to our benefit, right? We don't have to rely solely on it. So I was telling Chat, like, this is my thought process, and I want to make a formula out of this. And it gave me the formula, and I was like, oh, this is glorious, right? Like, and it walked me through exactly how to set it up. Because formulas are I don't want to say they're very new in ClickUp, but they are new. And I wanted to be able to break it down because I know how to use them, but I wanted to make an SOP for my client for when we're no longer working together, right? For her to be able to feel confident to edit that formula if they needed. And another thing that I actually use it for too is when I'm building very in-depth automations, which again, simplicity is key here, right? But I do have clients that come to me for rebuild. So they know ClickUp, they're ready to take it to the next level, and they want massive automations. And I always want to make sure I'm covering all my bases when I am doing a really big automation build out. So I'll ask Chat, like, I'll send it a screenshot essentially and be like, this is what I currently have. Am I missing anything? Because you don't want it to cancel out another automation that might be living somewhere else. So I kind of use it again as like a guide and kind of like how to, help check myself too. But it's definitely a tool that I utilize as well. And there's no shame in that, right? Like,
No,
there's
not at all. Right, because you're making it work for you. And I love that you brought in SOPs with that too, because the second you said that, I was like, oh, that would simplify a lot, actually. Yes. You're letting it guide you through things you aren't aware of, and then it's up to you to use your own discretion on how you move forward.
Exactly. And I have trained, everyone says I've trained my chat, but I have.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives me the answers based off of the knowledge that I gave it. So of course I could figure out all these things on my own, but if I have a tool that will help me and
exactly,
like I'm gonna do that.
Why not use it? Yeah.
I think the other thing that I was curious if you were going to mention is, like, you talked about the idea of like you do video SOPs and then you have a written transcript. Mm-hmm. Like, that's something that I feel like would be really good for an AI, because it's like you already have the training data, and like, don't make up anything else. Just put this into a different modality.
Yep.
Tends to work pretty well as well.
Yep. I love that. And that's something that I'll also assign my VAs to, if like, hey, I made this video. Can you, get the transcript from ChatGPT, take out any fluff, make sure it doesn't sound robotic, and then also make sure the timestamps are correct, because obviously AI is not perfect. But that's a little task that I'll offload. And you think that it doesn't save a lot of time, but those few minutes adds up. And that's, again, while I'm like I'm so team like SOPs, and even if it's a simple task, those few minutes really adds up, in your week, in your month, in your year. So that's something too that I always try to emphasize with team members too.
So if we go into the team side a little bit, just because we've now talked about it a few times and SOPs, there's kind of like a management philosophy difference of like, either you can like super micromanage of like, this is the steps you have to do, step 1, step 2, step 3, or there's like, this is the outcome and this is how you measure that it's good enough. When you're building processes, how much flexibility do you leave for like other people doing a task if the exact steps don't matter as much?
Yeah. So I always kind of try to feel my clients out. So if they're coming to me and they're keep mentioning like, we have this team member issue, we have these team member issues, and I don't want to micromanage, but I feel like I have to micromanage. I always try to challenge them on that. I'm like, well, why do you feel like that? Is your team member, do they struggle with problem solving? Do they rely on you too much? And again, back in my OBN days, when I used to hire team members, a really important pillar for me was looking out for, are they a problem solver? if I'm out of office, are they going to call me? Are they going to text me because they can't, do X, Y, and Z? Like, it's a fire that they can't put out. And it's like, well, first off, there's no fire ever in the online space. So let's get that out of the way. There's never anything that's that important. But for the team members, I always make sure that, are they a problem solver? And if they are a problem solver, that makes my creation of the SOPs that much easier, because like you said, I don't want to micromanage them. And I'm not telling them like, log into this, or sometimes I do that actually. But if we have to micromanage them, that's a red flag for me. So I always try to do like what you just said, that second option of is like, this is what done should look like. We're going to give you the tools, obviously, that you need to create the task or to complete the task. But micromanaging is a recipe for disaster, because, you want the team member to reveal what type of team member they are, if they can grow with you. Again, if they're that problem solver and they can take initiative and kind of run with it. Like if there is an issue, you don't want them coming to you. And I feel like depending on how we build out the SOPs will help reveal that to us, later on down the road, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Yes, it does. I'm curious, you brought up red flags. I'm sure you see a lot of them. Mm-hmm. What are some other red flags that you see, and what is the underlying issue that is actually leading to that?
Sure. So the biggest issue I see is my clients, when they come to me, they're like, we've tried ClickUp and we hate it and it just doesn't work. And I'm like, well, you probably didn't hate ClickUp. It probably just wasn't built, correctly for the way your business works, which that's, ClickUp's not for everybody, but usually it's not, you don't hate it. You just hate how it was built. That's the first thing. But the second thing is like when they say like, my team member will not use ClickUp. So I kind of go back to that first thing is, well, how was it built initially? Did they have a dashboard? Usually the answer is no. So they're trying to go into ClickUp. They're trying to go into all the lists, all the folders, all the spaces, just to find what they're assigned to for the day. That's a nightmare. I wouldn't want to do that. I would hate ClickUp too if I had to do that. So that's the second thing. So I always ask, like, how is it built? And second thing, did they have a dashboard? So the dashboard should be their main source of truth, essentially. Like they should be able to access your ClickUp SOP hub. I always say like you should put your SOPs at least in ClickUp, but if they're already built out in Google Drive, that's another thing. I don't want my clients to move everything over. If they're in Google Drive, they're already built out there, at least have a link somewhere for them to quickly access it, right? From their dashboard, right? So if they have their dashboard and you set them up for success, where they can see what's due for them today, tomorrow, next month, what's overdue. And if they're still not doing that after you've helped them and train them, you've had that adoption period where you have that few weeks of training with them and they still aren't getting it, that's a them problem. Like that, they're probably not cut. And I have to have that conversation a lot with my clients because they want to continue making edits thinking like ClickUp's the problem. And it's like, well, you have 3 other team members that are doing fine. You have 1 team member that's not. So it's not a system issue. It's a team issue, which is a more uncomfortable conversation for them to have. But unfortunately, they can kind of it will hinder them from scaling. They don't at the time, but that 1 team member will hold you back. And it's exhausting, right? It is exhausting. You've done everything that you can. And that's the not so fun part about being a business owner, right? Is having to have those tough conversations right. Of like, hey, you have to get with it or this isn't going to work for us anymore. And it's so uncomfortable, but it has to, the success of your business is what matters the most, right? And sometimes the team members just aren't a good fit anymore. Maybe they were in the beginning, but they're not anymore,
Yeah. I think a lot of this comes all the way down to what is the outcome that you want for your business and what systems, processes, and team members do you need to help you achieve that outcome? Because I think that's kind of the through line of this entire conversation, is if you want a specific outcome, but to your point, like the systems are working for it, but the team member is not, like that's a business conversation. And it is really easy to have emotions tied into it because we love the team members that we work with. But coming back to the outcome and being able to look at it objectively can help a lot with all of those decisions across the board.
That's right. Yep. Very true.
If I oversimplify where we are at in this conversation of we built a process, we put it into a project management platform. We've trained team members. We built a good dashboard so that they're using it. At this point, for you as a service provider is where you hand off a system to a client, I would assume. What do you see as the biggest reasons why the systems don't stick at this point? Like one of them, you talked about like the human problem. Are there some others there?
The adoption process, because my clients also have to go through that as well. And it's trusting the process, because it can be, because I do two different types of builds. I do rebuilds and then I do builds from scratch. The builds from scratch, I always tell and they probably get annoyed with me, but I'm like, hey, I want you to trust me that you're going to feel overwhelmed. And that's a normal feeling. And you probably should to some degree, right? You have a new system that's going to be basically monitoring your business, right? And it's going to reveal to you some things, some cracks maybe in the foundations that you weren't aware of. And that's okay to be part of the process, but you have to trust the process. These are the growing pains. And a lot of it is, and again, I fall victim to this, is because they waited too long to switch. So they're in this busy growing season of their business. And now they're having to learn ClickUp, which ClickUp can be a beast. I don't build it out that way. People usually try to do ClickUp on their own. They download all these free templates that ClickUp throws at you, which I don't know why they do that. And they end up never wanting to open it again. So then I come through it and I, get rid of all those and I start with something very basic. And I have to just remind them of like, this is something new and just trust me, trust the process, give yourself some grace as you're learning it too. And the way I do my builds is in phases. And I always take my clients through every phase before we move on to the next one so that they feel comfortable. So that way towards the end, they're not seeing it for the first time. And they're like, well, wait a second, like this is kind of confusing. So like phase one, when we're doing like the foundation, like the spaces, the lists, the folders, no, we're not even touching the automations yet. I make sure they feel comfortable navigating that piece of it. They understand why I built it out that way. Cause I feel like if they can understand what that outcome is, right, then they're more inclined to trust the process. But essentially, if I could just say, just trust the process, just trust me, it will work out.
Yeah, that could be so hard, but it is, patience is key with so many things.
I think the next part is like they fully onboarded, they got used to it. What are normal, good, healthy routines for maintaining a good system?
Yep. So I always say you should go to, specifically with ClickUp, is you should go to, ClickUp should be your main source of truth. Even if you don't use ClickUp, you should have a system that is your main source of truth. Your tasks are in there. Your team communication is primarily in there. You can use Slack. I use Slack with my team. You can do that. But hey, I'm going to go into ClickUp or I'm going to go into my project management tool and I'm going to see what's due for me today, tomorrow, next week, whatever. Basically having that single source of truth, right? And then going specifically with ClickUp. And I know Asana can do all this too, and Airtable, but having that dashboard, right? So you should be logging into ClickUp, looking at your dashboard every day, and then checking your ClickUp inbox. So your ClickUp inbox is going to show, I don't want to say urgent notifications, but notifications that you need to be made aware of. So if you're added to a task or a client or a team member tags you in a comment section of a task, whatever, all your notifications are going to live in that inbox area. It's not like a inbox, like your Google account. It's not going to be anything like that. It's going to tell you, it's going to help you stay on top of what's happening, especially as the business owner. You want to make sure that you're checking that to see what's going on through the workspace, right? And then again, checking your dashboard every single day. So dashboard and inbox every day, and whatever project management tool you're using, use that as the single source of truth. Don't go, as you're getting used to ClickUp or any system really, it can be very easy to go back to your old ways of like, well, let's just put it back, let's just put it in a Google Sheet. We'll add it to ClickUp later. Don't do that. Resist the urge to do that and just use the system as it should be until it's like a muscle, right? You have to continue exercising it and it gets easier as you go.
Yes. And being willing to iterate and adapt, like you were talking about too. We talk a lot about how everything is an experiment. You're, especially when it's new, looking at it as I'm learning, it's going to take time, and that's okay. Really does take a lot of the pressure off. And so ties straight back into trusting the process, seeing it as, a valuable piece that is going to help you get to where you want to go. Exactly. Really, really helps.
And I always, when I wrap up my builds, I create my own SOP hub for my client, my team, for everyone to have, particularly on how to navigate ClickUp, how to use a status, how to access your dashboard, how to make a task, how to track your time. They can Google that if they wanted to, but I always like to do that as like a little final touch. And that
I love that.
When their new team members come in, they can go ahead and go through all those videos I made. And that way they're not having to go to my client who also is still trying to learn ClickUp probably. And they have that hub of videos to watch as they continue to get used to ClickUp. So
that's amazing.
If you have like the daily routines, you're now going into ClickUp, you're doing all these things. Is there anything in your mind that is the equivalent of like you own a car, you need to change the oil every X number of months? Is there the same equivalent for systems?
Absolutely. So, and this is actually an important thing too. So no system's perfect, right? We want to make sure that we're checking, and you don't have to do this all the time, but I have an OBM mindset. Like I'm always a systems and processes first type of person. So I want to make sure that the process is always very clear. So always checking. I always like to check my automations to make sure they're triggering correctly. ClickUp does a really good job, particularly when sending automated emails, because that's something you can do in ClickUp, to automate emails, is if it doesn't go through, it'll give you that error code. So, going through, making sure that if there's any error codes with because again, no system's perfect. Just like a car is going to break down sometimes, you want to make sure that you're staying on top of the maintenance, obviously. But with ClickUp, same thing applies, like checking those automations. Is there any statuses that need to be updated? Is there any part of the workflow that changed? So if anything changes in your business, it should be in the front of your mind of like, hey, we need to revisit this in ClickUp to make sure the workflow still applies, or make any edits to the process as needed to prevent any bottlenecks in the future, any confusion in the future when you do hire new team members, or for your current team members too. That's typically what I try to do, is kind of do like a workspace overlook. And I don't do it all the time, but again, just to keep, kind of like you don't change your oil every single day. You want to make sure that, every few months things are still working as they should.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good reminder. Well, I think we can move into lightning round. We like to move into lightning round at the end of every podcast episode. So we just have a few, it's like 8 different questions, rapid fire style. Some of them are around systems, others might have to do with you. So let's just start with, which should somebody do first, build the system or hire the team member?
Build the system, 100%.
Yep. I feel like a lot of today's conversation supports that. So
why do most systems stop getting used within days and weeks?
There was no adoption period for the client or for the team member. It felt overwhelming. It wasn't built out correct. I mean, I could go on and on. It wasn't built correctly. It wasn't scalable. I mean, it could be a lot of things.
Okay. And when should you switch project management tools?
When it's not scalable anymore and you've outgrown it, which is why I always say start with ClickUp, because it will grow with you.
I love it.
What book are you currently reading?
I just started a new Bible study, actually, on the Bible recap, but I just finished a Frida McFadden book. I believe it was called Perfect Son, and it was amazing. So
nice. I know so many people love her books. I can't get into it. I'm a scaredy cat, so like it would not be good for my mental health. But clearly, she is an amazing writer because I see her name everywhere.
Very captivating. I love her.
That's awesome. Okay, what is a typical day in the life for you?
So I'm a mom, obviously. So I wake up and my kids are already at my bed asking me to make them something to eat. So I'm usually getting up, tending to them. And I always try to get a walk in. I'm very fitness, my mindset is around that a lot of the time. So I either go running in the morning, but I live in Louisiana. It's 100 degrees here. So I'll do a walk, or I'll also make sure to go to the gym as well in between working. And then I typically work between the hours of 9 to 3:30 p.m. Central Time. So I'm checking my computer throughout the day, my emails, things like that. And then when my husband gets home, I also log off of everything and make sure I'm spending quality time with my kiddos. And yeah, it's very simple. I'm a very simple girl.
I love it. Simple. I mean, that's on brand for you. Literally. Simple. Simple is everything.
Yeah, it's too complicated. It's not for me. Too complicated.
Yeah. I have to ask the systems follow-up. Do you get through all of your to-do lists every day?
I do. I actually have one overdue task, and it is to update an SOP for a team member. So yes.
I love it. Gotta keep it real. Okay. Who are you learning from right now?
So I love following, her name is Christy De Silva Life. I always give
Oh,
her,
yeah. Chrissy's awesome.
I love her. So she started as a VA when I was also a VA. And then she transitioned into ClickUp primarily. And I started really watching her at that point, like really started like investing into her. And I was like, I adore her. So whenever she gives a tip or trick, I'm like, oh, I'm trying that. Yep, I love that. Like I trust her, and I've always loved following her. And then I also have a business coach who gives me the best marketing advice too. Her name is Peggy. So I've been using her for a long time. So I learned a lot. I just got off of a call with her actually. So
Amazing.
Oh, cool. Love a
That's
good
awesome.
business coach.
Thank you so much for all of the knowledge that you shared today. For anyone who wants to learn more about what you do, where can they come connect with you?
So the best place is my Instagram. It's just Brittany Pearson _ClickUp, of course. I'm very active there on my stories and posting. I love to just make connections there, even if it's just a coffee chat, which is what we were originally going to do, which is so fun.
Right.
I have like a roster of coffee chats I do with people. So I love doing that. But Instagram is my favorite place. I like Facebook too, but Instagram is the best place for me. So
We get that. Well, guys, for those of you who are listening, we're going to link all of those in the show notes for you so you can go easily click and connect with Brittany more if you would like to. Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate you so much. And thank you, Brittany, for everything that you shared today. It was so valuable, and we just appreciate the time and knowledge that you gave.
yes, thank you. I had so much fun.
All right. See you guys next week. Bye.